The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. All she was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19th, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by K-9 dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings, but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives working with witnesses drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." Police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jaime Tanokco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jaime had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jaime had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather, but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jaime confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jaime released by Eugene Police. They believed Jaime matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jaime lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jaime about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jaime insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jaime lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jaime's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jaime's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jaime killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jaime had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened, she said in Lane County District Court. I pray that Jaime will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine. Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jaime grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jaime was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jaime's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said his behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved. A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jaime would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down, so she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jaime as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jaime's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jaime was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jaime did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Voigt sentenced Jaime to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this, she said. As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't. When Jaime becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jaime's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jaime began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jaime said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jaime said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jaime showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jaime has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jaime and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, A psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jaime had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jaime's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jaime Tanokco was found guilty on all counts. Jaime, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jaime said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Jaime's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jaime's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tanokco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jaime's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jaime remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Get ready to be engrossed in a tale that transcends time itself. A story of mystery and family awaits in a world where mysteries go unsolved. An intriguing story with enigmatic threads that is illuminated by hope. Introducing Melissa Heismith, a name that has endured through the ages and is linked to resiliency and loss. On May 4th, 2023, a remarkable discovery took place in the center of Fort Worth, Texas, solving a 51-year-old mystery that had fascinated people for generations. The unthinkable was confirmed on this historic day by Fort Worth police through DNA testing. For the majority of her life, Melissa Heismith, also known as Melanie, was actually the 22-month-old infant who, all those years ago, had been tragically abducted by her babysitter. In this video, we will unravel Melissa Heismith's tale, which is one of love, grief, and resiliency that spans time and ends with a remarkable reunion of family members, torn apart by fate. We'll look at the series of incidents that took place before her family eventually located their sister and daughter, who had been missing for a long time. Let's travel back in time to the 1960s, to a blind date set up by Jeffrey Heismith's roommate, which brought 18-year-old Alta Apentenko and 17-year-old Jeffrey Heismith together. Jeffrey remembers with fondness his first thoughts upon seeing Alta's breathtaking beauty. Their quick encounter soon resulted in marital bliss in November 1968. Jeffrey was a year younger than Alta. A year later, on November 6, 1969, a joyful occasion occurred. The couple's firstborn, a beautiful baby girl they named Melissa Heismith, brought joy into their lives. Melissa was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and got her name from one of Alta's friends. Jeffrey recalled Melissa as a happy, lively baby who was her father's favorite. Alta, on the other hand, found that becoming a parent was really difficult. Being the youngest of 12 children, Alta experienced adversity at a young age. The 6 youngest were placed in an orphanage when their mother was unable to care for all of her children. As a result, Alta spent 16 of her most formative years at the Christ Children's Home Church without ever feeling true maternal love. This lack of resources cast a pall over her mothering journey. Even though she had a difficult upbringing, Alta was unwavering in her determination to give Melissa the best life possible. The small family soon moved to southern Illinois, and life took a different turn from there as Jeffrey and Alta were constantly at odds. Their constant fighting finally caused their marriage to fail. In earlier interviews, they offered their version of events. Jeffrey was criticized for his lack of fidelity and selfishness, and Alta was called stern and aloof. They ultimately made the decision to split up because the negativity between them got too much. Alta looked to her brother Perry for help in the wake of the incident. With his help, she and their daughter Melissa were able to leave for Fort Worth, Texas, which appeared to be a good place to start over. They first shared a home with Ed, Alta's brother, and his spouse. But this was only a temporary arrangement as they later moved in with Carlene, Alta's niece. Alta, who had many siblings, did not feel inferior to Carlene because they were both the same age. Uncertainty surrounds what happened, but at some point the cohabitation broke down, forcing Alta and Melissa to take refuge with an old friend named Carol. Because they were raised in the same orphanage, Alta and Carol had a special relationship. Carol thought that living together would be a good idea because she also had a young son. While living with her friend Carol, Alta was able to get employment by doing cleaning for several churches. She was able to support herself and her daughter in this way. Jeffrey was completely missing from the picture and sending no money at all. Alta alone was responsible for overcoming these difficulties. Finding someone who could look after Melissa while she was at work became crucial because her new job was taking up the majority of her time. She made the decision to publish an advertisement in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on August 18, 1971. The advertisement read, "Spanish Gate Apartments is looking for a babysitter from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Make a call after 3 p.m. Shortly afterward, Alta received a response from a woman who expressed interest in taking on the role of babysitter. Back then, the idea of stranger danger wasn't as common. Thus, there was no way to identify this individual. Alta was forced to believe this woman when she said as much. Even so, she made an effort to establish some credibility by setting up a meeting in order to speak with the woman and get some important questions answered before giving her 22-month-old daughter to the babysitter. The woman never showed up for their scheduled meeting outside Alta's place of employment. Alta was under pressure to keep her job by reporting for work the following day, which caused her a great deal of anxiety due to this unanticipated hiccup. The babysitter promised Alta that she would take care of Melissa, even though she did not show up for their first appointment. She mentioned Melissa could have fun in her large backyard, which was a detail Alta found appealing. Despite their unsteady beginnings, Alta was forced to accept this babysitter's services because she was forced to do so by her professional obligations. As a result, Alta left her daughter Melissa in the temporary care of her roommate Carol on the morning of August 23, 1971. Interestingly, Carol didn't take on full-time babysitting duties that day despite having her own son. Although the precise causes of this are unknown, rumors circulated that she had prior arrangements. That August morning, Alta had to rush off to work, leaving Melissa and Carol, who was probably still drunk from the previous night, behind. It's assumed that someone came to the house at 8:30 a.m. The odd thing about this is that it's unclear if this person was a man or a woman. They identified themselves as Ruth Johnson and claimed to be Melissa's anticipated babysitter. The visitor's most distinctive feature was a pair of long white gloves, an odd, almost ostentatious choice, given the intense summer heat in Texas. The fact that gloves were present has sparked conjecture that they may have served as a preventative measure to remove any DNA evidence in addition to being a cunning ruse to conceal the subject's true gender. Carol did as directed and gave baby Melissa to this woman she could only refer to as Ruth Johnson. It's interesting that this person offered to look after Carol's son as well after entering the home. Carol turned down that offer for reasons that are unclear and passed Melissa on to her. This marked Melissa's final appearance for a really long time. Alta, who had been quite busy at work, had given the babysitter instructions to drop off Melissa by 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening when she got home. But the babysitter did not arrive, leaving Alta to wait tensely for Melissa. With no way to get in touch with her, Alta felt powerless. When Alta called the police in a desperate attempt to locate her daughter, she was told that she would have to wait a torturous 24 hours for any action to be taken. Melissa had not been seen in a long time, even after the 24-hour market had ended. Due to the seriousness of the situation, the FBI and the Fort Worth police collaborated on the investigation, which focused on Melissa's father, Jeffrey, at first as a possible suspect. Jeffrey, who was equally shocked by Melissa's abrupt disappearance, was being watched. But as they dug further into the case, investigators started to turn from a family-centered viewpoint to a darker possibility. Recent research on non-family infant abduction carried out by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children stated that these kidnappings were frequently carried out by single women who were unable to conceive and therefore turned to stealing children from other people. In the decades that followed Melissa's kidnapping, this theory came to be accepted as the leading theory in the hunt for her. For Alta, the stormy days and weeks and eventually months had been extremely damaging. She became entangled in an unending circle of blame and guilt. It was unbearably painful to bear. It was a trial every day. With her heart aching, Alta tried to make amends with Jeffrey, who was having emotional problems of his own, and at first turned her offer down. It would take about 2 years for Jeffrey to make up his mind to move back to Fort Worth, where they would reaffirm their vows in a more private and intimate ceremony. Over the next few years, Alta and Jeffrey's lives saw joy reappear once more. They accepted 4 additional blessings. In addition to a son named Jeffrey, who was christened after his father with affection, they had 3 daughters named Rebecca, Vicky, and Sharon. There was nevertheless an unspoken secret. The kids didn't know their eldest sibling was missing. It remained a well-kept secret for many years, coming to light only when the kids were 8 or 9 years old. One day, Jeffrey, their father, decided to tell the children about Melissa. While Alta clung to her silence, her past haunting her constantly, and her guilt over Melissa's disappearance overwhelming her. The weight of this unfinished chapter grew as the year went by. They realized what had happened. They had a sister, a sibling who may still exist somewhere in the world today. For years, this idea stoked an insatiable curiosity and renewed interest in locating their sister Melissa, the family's missing piece. The family kept looking for Melissa nonstop, never giving up. They kept her name alive and in the public eye in the current era of technology by sharing their heartbreaking story through podcasts, newspapers, and even online forums like Web Sleuths. They embraced social media, setting up a Finding Melissa Heismith Facebook page and requesting assistance from anyone who could lead them to the truth. The Heismith family experienced heartbreak and hopelessness in their search for Melissa. They raced across states following every lead that looked promising, and their tenacity knew no bounds. Then, in September 2022, there was a ray of hope when an anonymous tip about a potential sighting in South Carolina was received by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Even though it finally came to a dead end, the family's desire to carry on searching was rekindled by that almost successful discovery. However, the pivotal moment occurred on November 6th, when Melissa's brother, Jeffrey Heismith, received his 23andMe results, which disclosed an enigmatic match with a granddaughter he was unaware of. After he was rendered speechless by the news, Del Bosque looked into it more on Ancestry.com and discovered that the newly discovered grandchild had a last name in common with 2 boys who might be Melissa's nephews. The family experienced an overwhelming sense of hope and resolve as the puzzle pieces began to fit together. At last, after years of uncertainty and ceaseless searching, there appeared to be a breakthrough. They appeared to be making progress toward cracking the code of several decades and reuniting with Melissa, the missing link in their family, thanks to their tenacity and adept use of contemporary technology. They knew that even though the journey was far from over, they would not give up until they were able to embrace Melissa once more. The 3 children were positively identified as belonging to one of Melissa's sisters and the Heismith sisters. Were overjoyed to learn that the DNA results showed a sibling match. They went to Lisa Jo, an amateur genealogist who painstakingly examined the DNA charts in search of more confirmation. Lisa quickly made it clear that there was no question about these kids being Melissa's biological relatives. With renewed resolve and hope, Lisa made contact with the adoptive father of the kids, who gave her important background information, including Melissa's first name and her ex-husband's full name. Armed with this knowledge, the sisters set out on a mission that finally brought them to Melissa's Facebook account. They sent her a heartfelt message, nervously expressing their belief that they were family. Melissa was first skeptical. Reaching out to a long-lost relative appeared unbelievable and almost too good to be true. But then the Heismith revealed a very personal detail that touched Melissa's heart, which was a distinctive birthmark on her back. Her doubts gradually subsided, and she consented to take a DNA test in the hopes of at last discovering the answers she had been looking for so long. The Heismith knew deep down that they had located the missing piece, but the suspense and excitement mounted as they awaited the results. Regardless of the result, their relationship with Melissa grew closer as the day of revelation drew near. They had already overcome a great deal, and their newfound bond was evidence of the steadfast love and resiliency of a family that had been split up by circumstance, but had come back together via tenacity and the strength of a common ancestor. The Heismith family gathered at their beloved Fort Worth church on that unforgettable November 26th to celebrate Melissa's miraculous return. Victoria Garner was overcome with emotion and was unable to contain her happy tears. She was still in shock that her sister was standing in front of her, a reality they had long fantasized about. When the happy reunion finally set in, they were all in shock at how real it was that Melissa had been found. The family's relentless search for Melissa was disclosed in a statement from Sharon Heismith, who lives in Spain and is looking forward to meeting her. The family's suffering and frustration were exacerbated by the mishandling of the case by various agencies during their grueling journey. However, at this point, all they want is to give Melissa a big hug, accept her into the family, and make up for the 50 years of priceless time they lost. Their enduring love, tenacity, and resolve are demonstrated by their reunion. A touching story about a family that comes together in spite of all obstacles, showing that love and hope can overcome even the most difficult mysteries. What is evident, though, is Melissa's profound sense of loneliness and unwelcomeness throughout her childhood. She had no idea, though, that her birth family was always looking for her. The Heismith made sure to maintain her reputation in the public eye by throwing yearly birthday celebrations for her and making every effort to locate her. Unfortunately, justice was elusive because the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution ran out 2 decades after Melissa turned 18. Melissa is at last home, surrounded by the love and acceptance she had long yearned for, even though the whole truth may not yet be known. A devastating truth about Melissa's upbringing came to light during her reunion with her birth family. Her childhood was mysterious. She was raised under the name Melanie Mayoko. It's unclear if the woman who raised her was the same one who abducted her in the first place. She was raised by a woman she called Mom, but their relationship was tense from the start, and when she was 15 she moved out. This woman admitted she knew Melissa had been abducted when she was recently confronted by Melissa's sisters. Melissa's own words illuminated the painful childhood memory she carried with her. She said that she had never been close to her mother and that her upbringing with her had been challenging and turbulent. Melissa was never permitted to play outside or enjoy the small pleasures of childhood. She had never been exposed to the outside world. This extreme sheltering was justified by extremely painful reasons. She was informed that her brain damage through home birth was the cause. The revelations highlighted Melissa's upbringing's emotional turmoil by exposing wounds that had been kept hidden for far too long. Melissa moved to Charleston, South Carolina, 1,000 miles away from her birthplace, somewhere along the way. Thanks to the internet's power, it was there that she made her first contact with her birth family. She was first dubious and thought it might be a scam, but as she read through the messages more carefully and got to know her new family, the truth became clear to her. Their mother was subjected to hurtful accusations following Melissa's disappearance, including the possibility that she was complicit in her daughter's disappearance, even though she was overcome with guilt. The family statement stressed that Melissa's care was entrusted to the person who volunteered to watch her while their mother worked and that their mother did the best she could with the limited resources at her disposal. Their mother finally received justice. The Heismith family offers a message of unwavering determination to those looking for missing loved ones, bringing closure to a difficult chapter in their lives. Never give up and follow up on all leads. Melissa's rediscovery was ultimately the result of their own unwavering pursuit, demonstrating that hope and perseverance can overcome even the most difficult situations. The long-standing mystery was resolved, and the truth was ultimately verified on the historic day of May 4th, 2023. After completing the DNA testing, the Fort Worth police were able to confirm that Melissa Heismith was, in fact, the 22-month-old child who was tragically abducted 51 years ago by her babysitter. Since the truth has come to light, Melissa is adjusting to a new chapter in her life that will be surrounded by her birth family's love and support. As she comes to terms with having two parents, four siblings, and a plethora of nieces and nephews who were eager to find her, the enormity of the discovery is beginning to sink in. Melissa was amazed by her large and loving family's revolution. She used to think that she didn't have many family members, but now she realizes that she has a large, caring network of people who have never stopped looking for her. Her mother, with whom she instantly connected, is a touching example of the strength of familial bonds that endure despite time and space. Melissa is taking back her real first name and dropping the name Melanie, which she went by for the majority of her life, as she continues to come to terms with her new identity. Her wish to see her father walk her down the aisle in a rekindled marriage to her present spouse and her wish to spend more time with her mother are both lovely expressions of love and forgiveness. After this incredible journey of rediscovery, we are left with unanswered questions that make our hearts ache. All those years ago, who was this mysterious person wearing white gloves? Now that she's embraced her birth name and reestablished contact with her family? The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Plass was born on December 11th, 1990. She grew up in Chopee, Massachusetts, with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Amanda's mother, Michelle Myers, described her daughter as a hippie and often joked that she was born in the wrong era. In 2011, Amanda worked as a waitress at a Friendly's in Chopee and was dating a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. On August 26, 2011, Seth called 911 to report that he had found Amanda unconscious in the kitchen of her third-floor apartment. During the call, Seth tearfully told the operator that when he arrived, Amanda was lying on the floor, unresponsive, with multiple stab wounds to her body. He did not know how to help and requested the police and an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Amanda had died from multiple stab wounds, including to her chest, throat, and abdomen. Police cordoned off the home where the crime took place. When they arrived, they found Seth on the porch, crying and unable to calm down. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had escaped but left behind some evidence. The first thing that caught the detectives' attention was the large amount of blood in the kitchen, indicating that the attack had been carried out with a knife. Police also found Nike shoe prints on the floor and handprints on the broken glass window. The motive for this brutal murder remains a mystery. Based on the condition and number of Amanda's injuries, detectives suspect that she may have known her attacker and that the motive was a personal vendetta. Therefore, the first suspect was Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green. Police took Seth Green in for questioning. It was no surprise that he was the first suspect, given his close relationship with the victim, his blood-stained clothing, and his role in calling 911. The fact that he and Amanda had been dating for less than 2 weeks before her death, and that her family barely knew him raised suspicions. Seth was 7 years older than Amanda and likely had different views on some issues. But did that lead to an argument that resulted in the brutal crime? This led investigators to suspect that Seth could be the killer, even though he claimed Amanda was dead before he arrived at her apartment. They determined that about 2 hours had passed between Amanda's death and Seth calling 911. That was enough time to cover up evidence and remove the weapon. So the first question detectives had to answer was whether Seth Green had anything to do with Amanda's death. When Seth showed up at the police station, he looked like he had just been through something terrible. He was mourning the death of his girlfriend. Investigators wanted to know if his feelings were genuine or if he was just trying to deflect suspicion from himself. During questioning, Seth said he had been working all day. He had planned to take Amanda to the restaurant where she worked, but couldn't because of his busy schedule. Seth said he didn't know Amanda well because they weren't in a long-term relationship, but he loved her and had no reason to hurt her. Seth worked as a carpenter at a construction site. Investigators began asking him about his tools, implying that he may have used one of them to commit the crime. Seth often used a tool belt at work, which contained a variety of carpentry tools, including a knife. However, he claimed that he always put the tool belt back after work, and that day was no exception. Seth finished the job, changed his clothes and tools, and then went to see Amanda. He understood why he was the most suspected, but he still insisted that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend's death. The police eventually confirmed Seth's alibi. He even passed a lie detector test. When he arrived at the scene, he was wearing construction shoes, which clearly did not match the Nike shoe prints at the scene. In addition, his shoe size was much larger, and the fingerprints on the glasses did not belong to him. With these facts, the police eliminated him as a suspect. Because Amanda tried to resist, she inflicted injuries on the perpetrator. The perpetrator likely suffered scratches on his body in the first weeks after the crime, as a piece of skin belonging to the perpetrator was found under Amanda's fingernails, an important piece of evidence that the police had hoped for. However, when they tested the DNA sample, they found no match in the database. The motive for the crime remains unclear, as many of the items in Amanda's room were still intact. With no signs of forced entry, the police have two theories as to how the criminals entered the house. Amanda may have known them and let them in, or she may have forgotten to lock the door. Investigators interviewed Amanda's co-workers and friends and discovered that the case may have involved a love triangle. Before dating Seth, Amanda had been in a relationship with someone else, and the breakup was not smooth because Amanda initiated it. After a while, she started dating Seth, and Amanda's ex-boyfriend did not seem to be happy with this. Jealousy sometimes leads people to act rashly with serious consequences. Investigators checked the information but found this theory to be unlikely. Amanda's ex-boyfriend provided his DNA and fingerprints, neither of which matched the traces found on her body or at the scene. Furthermore, he had a convincing alibi. Police investigated other leads but failed to find the solution to Amanda's death, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Amanda's family was determined to find justice, so they distributed flyers and held community events in the hope that someone would come forward with vital information. Amanda's mother, Michelle, said her daughter was not perfect, but she did not understand why Amanda died and why no one had reported any useful information to the police. Amanda's family faced another emotional challenge. They discovered that several police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body on their phones and shared them with others, including civilians. According to an internal report, Sergeant Keith Lame, a senior officer who was in charge of monitoring the scene at 73 School Street, where Amanda was stabbed to death on August 26, 2011, was one of the photographers. He sent the photos from his cell phone to another sergeant, who then forwarded them to a patrol officer. One officer shared the photo with civilians, including a coach at a youth soccer game. Records show that Keith used his cell phone to take the photo. Keith then forwarded the photo to Sergeant Jeffrey Godair. Sergeant Jeffrey emailed the photo to Patrolman Chad Levesque. Patrolman Chad shared the photo of Amanda lying on the kitchen floor with other soccer coaches. As he did so, Chad said, "This is something I have to deal with at work." The photo was shown to at least 3 coaches at a youth soccer game in Agawam the day after the murder, according to Captain William Jebb, the internal affairs officer who wrote the report. At that time, Patrolman Terry Deck, who was assigned to record all traffic in the apartment for state police, took a photo of Amanda's body and emailed it separately to 6 Chickpea police officers. The investigation found that all 6 officers deleted the emails. None of them were punished for wrongdoing and their names were not listed on criminal records. The others were punished for incompetence and failure to meet work standards. Terry and Keith, who took the photos, received letters of reprimand. Jeffrey and Chad were docked wages. Nearly 2 years after the murder, there was no sign that the investigation was any closer to finding the culprit. So investigators decided to review all the relevant evidence, hoping to find some missing information. After reviewing the evidence and items in Amanda's bedroom, they discovered a dry erase board with a suspicious message. The message read, "Dennis was here on November 8th. Interestingly, November 8th was only about 2 weeks before Amanda's body was discovered. Investigators began to wonder about the man named Dennis and his role in the case. They began to investigate the relationship between Dennis and Amanda by examining phone records and social media posts. While investigating Amanda's apartment, police discovered that her ex-boyfriend had given them a crucial clue. He said that Amanda's apartment had been broken into several times during her absence. In particular, Amanda told him that she suspected a young Puerto Rican man whose name began with the letter D. However, She did not want to report the incident to the police and wanted to resolve the situation herself by talking to the man. Amanda tried to talk to the man about the break-in, but he would not listen. Amanda then informed him that a neighbor had witnessed him at her apartment. She also begged him to return items that were missing from her home. However, the man became angry and left. The main goal of the investigators was to identify Dennis and determine whether he was involved in Amanda's death. They discovered that a man named Dennis Rosa Roman lived near where Amanda died. A search of Dennis's records revealed that he had been convicted of burglary and breaking and entering. However, no fingerprints were found that matched the ones found at Amanda's home. Police tracked Dennis to Westfield, Massachusetts, and asked him to come to the police station to talk, but he refused. During the brief encounter, Dennis appeared very nervous. Surprisingly, Dennis turned himself into the police station in November 2013 at the age of 22. Police questioned Dennis about his connection to Amanda. Although Dennis admitted to knowing Amanda from Choppy, he said he had not seen her in several years. This made sense since Amanda had been dead for some time. Investigators then asked him if he had ever been to Amanda's apartment. He replied that he had never been there and did not really know her well. He only admitted that he sometimes sold Amanda marijuana and had had a few brief interactions with her. During questioning, Dennis agreed to provide an oral DNA sample and provided his shoe size. The results showed that his shoe size matched the shoes found at the crime scene. Officers also noted that Dennis was wearing a pair of Nike Air Max shoes, the same type as the shoes found at the scene but with a different sole pattern. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions and promised to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Because there was insufficient evidence to arrest him, officers were forced to release him. This raised concerns that he might be attempting to flee, causing the investigation to stall. Further investigation revealed that Amanda had been in telephone contact with Dennis on July 28, 2011. She made 4 calls and received 5 calls from him. At the same time, Dennis changed his initial statement to police, admitting that he had spoken to Amanda at times. According to Dennis, Amanda told him that people frequently broke into her apartment when she was away, but she did not report it to the police because nothing of value was missing. However, investigators had heard this story many times before and now suspected Dennis was behind the break-ins. They believed he was hiding something, as his statement changed and lacked a clear explanation. When shown a photo of the dry erase board that read Dennis was here on November 8, 11, Dennis suddenly remembered writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never been in Amanda's apartment. Additionally, DNA testing revealed that his DNA matched DNA found under Amanda's fingernails and that his fingerprints were on a glass pane at the crime scene. This evidence confirmed Dennis's connection to the crime. After realizing that too much evidence was directly against him, Dennis changed his story again. He now claimed to have been present at the crime scene and tried to save Amanda from the attacker, implying that someone else was involved. When asked about the man's identity, Dennis refused, citing fear for his safety and that of his family. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the alleged perpetrator, a tall 170 to 200-pound white male with light skin, blue eyes, wearing old pants and dirty boots, along with a t-shirt that read, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Detectives did not believe Dennis' testimony, as all the evidence pointed to only one person being present at the crime scene when Amanda was stabbed. They arrested Dennis and charged him with the murder of Amanda Plass. The trial began in 2016, nearly 3 years later. Dennis' lawyers defended their client, arguing that although he was present at the crime scene, he was not responsible for Amanda's death. They accused the police of mishandling the investigation and framing Dennis after they failed to investigate thoroughly. Dennis claimed that on the day of Amanda's death, the drug dealer forced him to come to her apartment because Amanda owed the dealer $500 or $600. He claimed that the dealer started stabbing Amanda with a knife when things got bad. Dennis claimed that he wanted to intervene but was unable to stop the dealer. Dennis also claimed that Amanda had grabbed his hand, which is why his DNA was found under her fingernails. Prosecutors presented a different version of events. According to them, Dennis broke into Amanda's apartment while she was away and left a note with his name on her whiteboard. Amanda discovered this, suspected Dennis was the culprit, and called him to ask him to return her stolen belongings, which led to 9 phone calls between Amanda and Dennis. Prosecutors claimed that on the day of the murder, Dennis returned to Amanda's apartment thinking she was at work. However, Amanda had come home and a fight broke out, leading to Dennis killing her. A 12-person jury found Dennis guilty of causing the death of Amanda Plass in July 2016 after hearing 8 days of testimony and deliberating for 5 hours. The court sentenced Dennis to life in prison without parole. The police department's internal investigation into the scandal surrounding the release of Amanda's photo was delayed for years. However, in 2018, Officer Jeffrey Gauthier was finally fired in connection with the case. Although he appealed the decision, he returned to work in 2020. Due to his misconduct and previous disciplinary actions, a commission demoted him to patrol officer. Amanda's law went into effect in Massachusetts on August 4, 2022. The law makes it a misdemeanor for first responders to illegally take photos of a crime scene, punishable by up to a year in jail or a $2,000 fine. Amanda's family also filed a lawsuit against the city of Chopee, which was eventually settled out of court for $100,000. The body of a male was found on June 11, 1984, by a farmer in rural Lincoln County, Missouri. The body was discovered inside a pump house near Highway FA, outside Troy, Missouri. The man was wearing an expensive Bill Blassgrace suit with red pinstripes, a winter tie, and a cashmere pea coat. An autopsy determined that the man lost his life months before being found. He suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the back of the head. Analysis performed at the time of discovery suggested that these were the remains of an adult male of European ancestry, and he was between 40 and 80 years old. He likely stood between 6 feet to 6'2" inches tall. Unfortunately, investigators were not able to name the victim, let alone the perpetrator, so the case went cold. Then on March 29, 2023, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office announced in a press conference that the John Doe had been identified through a DNA match as Jack Langeneckert, a 50-year-old real estate agent who had been living with his wife and son in Florissant, Missouri, when he went missing in 1982. The breakthrough is thanks to forensic genetic genealogy, the increasingly common practice of identifying DNA through comparisons to genetic profiles in genealogy databases. Now that detectives have a name, Captain David Hill said they are working to solve who took Jack's life and how his body ended up on a Lincoln County farm. One of the interesting things about cold cases that are this old is you have to rebuild, Hill said. Who did they hang out with? Who are their friends? Where did they work? What did they do? Authorities believe Jack Langenecker lost his life not long after he went missing in 1982. His car was found a week after his disappearance at the Lambert Airport. Hill said it was too early in the investigation to elaborate more on the details of Jack's disappearance, including why someone may have wanted to hurt him. According to Hill, Jack's family said they filed a missing person report when he went missing, but sheriff's investigators are still trying to find investigative files from the 1982 case. Jack's remains were first tested for DNA in 2015, but lab researchers were not able to find a match in the DNA database, which contains DNA profiles obtained by law enforcement. The sheriff's office reopened the case after a Southeast Missouri State University anthropology professor, Dr. Jennifer Bengtson, offered in 2021 to help the cold case unit identify human remains. The professor and her advanced students identify which parts of the skeletal remains are best for testing and pay through grants and donations for DNA labs and to do genetic analysis. Othram, a private DNA lab specializing in cold cases, performed the analysis in Jack Langeneckert case. Dr. Jennifer Bengtson said, "The number of human remains still left unidentified is a tragedy of the scale that most people do not realize. Even though my lab is small, I'm really proud of my students for helping bring answers to these families." Human remains were found in the woods behind a hotel outside Atlanta on September 16, 1993. Someone had seemingly placed the remains behind an electrical unit that was covered by pine-strawn branches in a wooded area that sat between a former Fairfield Inn and a vacant medical office. This was an apparent attempt to hide the body, which was already in an advanced state of decomposition. The now quality in Northlake still exists and is located less than 20 miles northeast of downtown Atlanta. An autopsy concluded that the remains belonged to a middle-aged woman. Due to the state of the remains, investigators believed that the woman's life was taken between 2 weeks and 3 months prior to being found. No identification could be found with the body, and although the early investigation determined that the victim had undergone extensive dental work and hip replacement surgery that may have caused her to walk with an unusual gait, a lack of additional details about who the woman could be led to case to run cold. Finally, in March 2023, the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office announced that they identified the Jane Doe as 52-year-old Rebecca Becky Burke. Becky was eventually identified through forensic genetic genealogy, an advanced form of DNA testing that involved the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System and OthRAM, a company that specializes in forensic genealogy to help solve cold cases. Forensic genetic genealogy combines traditional genealogy research with DNA analysis and is often used to identify both suspects and victims in criminal cases, where more traditional identification methods have been unsuccessful. The district attorney's office said those tests linked Becky's remains to a family member, which allowed investigators to learn more about her and her background. Authorities say Becky may have also used the last names McKesney or Barnes, and her last known residence was in either the Marietta or Smyrna areas of Cobb County, Georgia. A cold case task force is seeking information about a possible suspect. DeKalb County District Attorney Sherry Boston urged anyone who knew Becky or worked at the area where her body was found around that time to contact authorities. "We are very grateful to finally have identified Becky Burke's remains, but the work does not end here," Sherry Boston said in a statement. Becky Burke was described as white with long curly light brown hair. Officials also believe her to have stood at 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing close to 130 pounds. The case of Ingrid Lyne. Ingrid, a devoted mother and healthcare professional, was searching for companionship and romance in the modern world of online dating. Unaware, her quest for love would lead to a chilling encounter that would culminate in unimaginable horror. Ingrid Marilyn Lyne, born on August 2, 1975, lived in Renton, Washington with her 3 young daughters just outside Seattle. She worked as a nurse at the Swedish Medical Center in Seattle, while managing life as a divorced parent, having recently separated from Philip, the father of her children. Custody arrangements were made to share parenting duties between Ingrid and Philip. Ingrid was described as a petite woman with a vibrant personality. She was deeply devoted to her daughters, willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their safety and well-being. On April 9, 2016, Philip, Ingrid's former spouse, visited their residence in Renton, King County, Washington. Despite their divorce, Philip and Ingrid maintained a cordial relationship to effectively co-parent their 3 children. Noelle, 10 years old, Brooke, 8 years old, and Reese, 6 years old at the time. Ingrid knew that Philip planned to bring the girls back to their apartment in Renton after spending the night with. When Philip arrived at the house around 10 a.m., he noticed that Ingrid's Toyota Highlander was not in its usual spot in front of the house. Although Ingrid was supposed to be off duty from her job as a nurse at Seattle's Swedish Medical Center, she was expecting her daughters to return to her care that day. Philip was confident that Ingrid would have been home to welcome them. After several failed attempts to reach Ingrid by phone, Philip contacted Ingrid's mother, Jorga. Together, they entered the house using the key Jorga had. While searching the house, Jorga found Ingrid's purse, phone, and other personal belongings, including her driver's license. But there was no sign of Ingrid herself. It seemed unlikely that she would have left without notifying anyone. Concerned, Jorga decided to contact the authorities and report that Ingrid was missing. As the investigation progressed, the authorities reached out to Ingrid's friends and neighbors, learning that she had mentioned going on a date the previous night to one of them. Additionally, a neighbor mentioned that Ingrid had recently started seeing a man. Jorga and Philip were unaware of Ingrid's romantic involvement, but they shared a phone account, allowing Ingrid to access Jorga's call logs. Upon inspecting the logs, Jorga noticed multiple calls to the same Montana-based number. Suspicious, Ingrid's sister conducted some online investigation and discovered that the number belonged to a Facebook account registered to a man named John Robert Charlton. Concerned about her daughter's well-being, Yorga reached out to the number via text on Saturday, informing the recipient that she had contacted 911 to seek information about her daughter's whereabouts. John Charlton responded to Yorga's text with surprise, asking, "What's happening?" He then explained that he and Ingrid had attended a Mariners game the previous day, but did not spend the night together, as Ingrid needed to be up early to tend to her children. Despite Yorga's insistence that he speak to the police, John did not respond further. On April 9th, a resident named Mike Novasio, who lives in the Seattle area, made a call to the authorities. When he returned home, he noticed an unusual weight in one of his recycling bins, which he had left outside for collection, scheduled for April 7th. Sensing that something was wrong, he decided to investigate further. Upon opening the bin, he was shocked to find 3 translucent plastic bags, one of which contained what appeared to be human remains. Alarmed, he promptly notified the authorities. Upon their arrival, the police and medical examiner carefully examined the contents of the bags. Inside, they discovered a human head, a foot, an arm with a hand, and a lower leg. Despite the absence of decomposition, the facial features were still discernible, allowing for the identification of the remains as belonging to Ingrid Lyne. In the following days, additional fragments of Ingrid's remains were found. Some were discovered at a recycling facility, while others were located in a cooler at a different site. Unfortunately, not all of Ingrid's remains were recovered. During a search of Ingrid's home, the police found Marina's game tickets on her laptop, dated April 8th. It was inferred that Ingrid and John had attended the game scheduled for 7:10 p.m. on April 11th. John was brought in for questioning following his arrest. During the interrogation, he admitted to knowing Ingrid and revealed that they had been dating for approximately a month after meeting online. He stated that he typically spent the night at her residence, but on that particular night he did not, as her children were due to return the following day. He recounted that they went to a bar following the Mariners game before driving back to her residence in her car. He admitted to having little recollection of events thereafter, attributing it to being heavily intoxicated. John mentioned they engaged in sexual activity that night and remembered Ingrid's peculiar behavior, but beyond that, his memory was hazy. When questioned about his actions afterward, he claimed uncertainty, but speculated that he likely slept on a downtown Seattle sidewalk, waking up there the next morning. He surmised that Ingrid had driven him to the city center of Seattle before departing. John expressed to authorities that he was not of sound mind, struggling with alcohol dependency and currently without a permanent residence. John underwent a physical examination, and his injuries were documented through photographs. Scratches were observed on his left hand and forehead, while cuts were present on his mouth and chin, along with scrapes on his chest. His ex-girlfriend informed authorities that she had encountered him on April 9th, noting a swollen and injured lip. Despite claiming he was robbed, he still had his wallet. On April 20th, the police found Ingrid's vehicle in Belltown, just outside of Seattle. However, John's account contradicted the evidence. When they searched the car, the authorities found garbage bags identical to the ones containing the body parts. Additionally, 3 fingerprints lifted from the driver's door handle were sent for testing, and the results matched those of John Charlton. John Charlton was arrested by the authorities on suspicion of committing first-degree murder against Ingrid, as well as stealing her vehicle. The case against John heavily depended on circumstantial evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty. During his defense, John's legal team argued the lack of physical evidence connecting him to Ingrid's murder. Initially, John denied any knowledge of Ingrid's fate that night, but later changed his plea to guilty. Before the trial, based on the evidence presented during court proceedings, the prosecution contended that John strangled Ingrid to death within her residence before dismembering her body in her bathtub using a pruning saw. Following the dismemberment, John purportedly disposed of Ingrid's remains across various locations in Seattle. Ingrid's death was officially classified as a homicide by the medical examiner. During the investigation of her residence, authorities found an almost empty package of plastic bags similar to those in which her body parts were discovered across Seattle. Ingrid's bathroom yielded a 15-inch pruning saw suspected to have been used in the dismemberment process. Upon inspecting the area beneath the bathtub, police uncovered human remains. John Charlton received the maximum sentence permitted under the state's sentencing guidelines, which amounted to a prison term of just over 27 years. However, Judge Julie Spector of the King County Superior Court conveyed her wish to impose a life sentence, if possible, underscoring the brutal and cruel nature of John's actions. Beyond anyone's belief, during his sentencing, John addressed the court and Ingrid's family, expressing his remorse with the words, "I'm truly sorry." Prior to the charges related to homicide, John had a history of criminal convictions, including aggravated robbery, felony theft, grand theft auto, fourth-degree assault, and third-degree theft. Additionally, he was arrested for burglary. John's past was marked by turmoil. In 2006, his parents, Rye and Joan Charlton, expressed concerns for their safety due to their son's drunken behavior. This prompted them to obtain a temporary protection order against him. John disclosed to them that he was feeling overwhelmed by life's pressures and experiencing psychological instability. Court records indicate that on March 2, 2006, John was intoxicated and aggressive, attempting to provoke a confrontation with his parents. Reports suggest that he was found intoxicated and behaving aggressively towards them in their residence, posing a physical and verbal threat. During this period, Rye recalled an incident where John forced his wife to watch the movie Hannibal, which he had retrieved from a shelf, warning her to watch this and be cautious. Court documents also revealed John's parents' concerns about his potential crack cocaine use, along with their observation that he holds grudges for years and becomes frustrated and intimidating when under the influence of alcohol or drugs, causing fear of violence. It was upon the request of John's parents that the petition for the protection order was eventually withdrawn. Friends of Ingrid speculate that she ventured into online dating because, as a single parent juggling 2 young daughters and a demanding full-time nursing job, it seemed like a convenient way to meet someone amidst her hectic routine. Ingrid's untimely death left a profound void in the lives of her loved ones, whose grief knows no bounds. Their pain is a testament to the irreparable loss of a cherished mother, daughter, and friend. In the aftermath, the community rallied around Ingrid's family, offering support and solidarity in their time of need. Their resilience in the face of tragedy is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Though Ingrid's life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. May her story serve as a cautionary tale, inspiring us to prioritize safety and vigilance in the digital age. In the peaceful summer of the year 1975, a charming Pennsylvanian village called Brummel was thrown into gloominess by a terrifying occurrence that would plague the neighborhood for ages. On August 15, 1975, amidst the everyday routine, Gretchen Harrington, an innocent 8-year-old girl, inexplicably disappeared on her way to a Bible school program. By the time she was found, she had already been dead. Nobody knew who killed this young girl in Pennsylvania for nearly 50 years, but authorities now claim to have identified the culprit as a former pastor who has been residing in Marietta for some time. At the time, as days proceeded into weeks, then into months, and then into years, the town devotedly searched for its beloved young Gretchen, but like a dark maze, the answers eluded them, leaving them longing for resolution. Nevertheless, they never gave up hope. Get ready to have your world turned upside down because, in 2023, a shocking revelation shatters the stillness and rekindles the flames of justice in the pursuit of Gretchen Harrington's mystery. Stay with us as we explore Gretchen Harrington's tragic narrative, a tale of mystery, suffering, and the unwavering pursuit of the truth that resulted in a startling revelation that rocked Pennsylvania and the world. After 48 long years, the criminal who brought about Gretchen's awful demise was found. Surprisingly, this ruthless murderer had been concealing himself in plain sight by posing as a church minister, a typical example of what the Bible calls a wolf in sheep's clothing. Harold and Ina Harrington welcomed Gretchen into the world on June 13, 1967 in Marple Township, Pennsylvania. 8 years later, in the summer of 1975, there was a terrifying development just a short distance away from her home. Bright-eyed 8-year-old Gretchen Harrington was traveling to Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church for a Bible school session. She usually traveled with her older sisters, but on that particular day she went there alone. By the next day, alarm bells rang for her frightened parents as the hours passed and the morning sun rose to its highest point. But there was no sign of Gretchen. They immediately called the Marple Township Police in a panicked state. The police then commenced a desperate search for their young daughter. Over 300 people from the entire community came together to search desperately for Gretchen, but as the hour wore on, she could not be found. This left nothing but a perplexing enigma afterwards. Gretchen would usually go up a steep hill to Trinity Chapel, enduring the trip past the store and townhouse complex. Around 9:25 a.m., a neighbor claimed to have seen her. She appeared determined and focused to get to her destination, but mysteriously, she soon disappeared. People in the Harringtons' neighborhood wouldn't stand still and watch. Everyone wanted to help. As a result, 400 volunteers came together to form an army to help with the hunt through the thick undergrowth that covered the ground in the woods. They searched every square inch in the vicinity of the grocery store and housing developments in the hopes of finding some clues before dusk. Gretchen eluded them despite the fact that they traversed more than 5 square miles of hazardous terrain. The small village held its breath in prayer for her safe return, while the mystery behind her sudden disappearance made many hearts weary. The search for young Gretchen came to a puzzling dead end as the investigation progressed. The tracking dogs, talented as they were, detected no struggle or signs of discomfort halfway up that intimidating hill on Lawrence Road, leaving the question of what really happened to Gretchen hanging in the air. At that same moment, it appeared as though 8-year-old Gretchen had disappeared into thin air, leaving the police with a troubling judgment. They were of the opinion that Gretchen must have been driven away in a car. During these trying times, the neighborhood supported Gretchen's parents wholeheartedly. The Reformed Presbyterian Covenant Church minister, Harold Harrington, and his wife, Ina Harrington, raised their 4 daughters with care and tenderness. Although their Sundays had a hint of strictness, TV and outdoor play were forbidden on the holy day. Their family was united and harbored no known enemies. The entire community was adamant about finding out the truth because they wanted beloved Gretchen to be brought back to her home safely without any harm. The charm and warmth Gretchen Harrington exuded toward those she loved were as warm as the summer sun. Was she wary of strangers? Yes, but she was a vibrant spark of vitality in her school, especially when she finds herself among her group of friends. Her companionship brought comfort to classmates and neighbors who attended neighboring schools as well. She was an outstanding sportsman. She dominated the kickball court and the baseball diamond with her powerful home runs. Gretchen never knew her perception of life was going to change. 8 days before she disappeared, a new baby sister was birthed in their home, and Gretchen, who had been jokingly teasing about leaving if she got another sister, couldn't help but succumb to love's charm when she laid eyes on her baby sister. The community's ardent quest for Gretchen was now fueled by recollections of her brilliant smile and free-spirited spirit as they banded together to find their beloved Gretchen. Everyone clung to the hope that she would be returned to her devoted family. Where her sisters awaited her arrival and craved for more baseball games to be won, Harold and Ina firmly believed that their daughter, Gretchen, would never willingly get into another person's car. As the probe spread widely through the area, detectives knocked on doors, distributed leaflets with Gretchen's photo on them, and set up a 24-hour tip line. Over 200 calls flooded the hotline in those early days, and the diligent investigators followed every possible lead. Despite their diligence, however, the trail proved elusive, and none of the information presented gave a clear route to Gretchen's whereabouts. The small community in Gretchen's absence yearned for the day when her laughter would once more reverberate through their streets. The search for Gretchen felt like a desperate voyage through a maze with no exits. As the days stretched into 2 protracted weeks, detectives were forced to face a terrible truth. Despite their initial optimism that she might have been kidnapped for ransom, foul play was suddenly the menacing shadow they couldn't overlook. In an effort to find a lead that would help solve the case, they dispersed their efforts far and wide, covering Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey with missing person flyers. Tips and possible lead flooded the hotline. A glimmer of hope was won by each, but none could be verified. The cloud of mystery appeared to be broken by one lead, on the day Gretchen vanished. A truck driver who was traveling along Lawrence Road came forward to describe a scenario that matched Gretchen's description. He was able to clearly recall a green pickup truck that was parked halfway up the hill, heading towards Trinity Chapel. He claimed to have seen a young girl who possibly looked like Gretchen, sitting inside the truck beside an unidentified man who happened to be the driver. The truck looked worn out, dated, and even without its tailgate. Thus, important details remained hidden. As the search continued, the community prayed that this tip might ultimately reveal Gretchen's whereabouts and provide consolation to her distraught family. As the coming weeks dragged on menacingly, some mystery reports began to surface from the shadows. According to a woman's statement, a man was seen on Lawrence Road, guiding a young child into a white compact automobile. Another witness, meanwhile, remembered seeing a white male, possibly a teenager, and a young child running in the direction of a white four-door automobile. The puzzle pieces appeared to taunt the detectives, but since none of the cars or their drivers could be recognized, the real story remained a secret. If any of these incidents had anything to do with Gretchen's disappearance, it was still unknown. The once-clawed hotline had grown near really calm by the end of September, and the case had started to lose its passion. The detectives painstakingly sought for prospective persons of interest but were unable to come to any conclusive conclusions. The investigators worked hard to identify prospective persons of interest, but they had trouble conclusively linking any of them to Gretchen's disappearance. As promising leads dwindled and the terrifying truth became clear, the investigators' frustration increased. Since they didn't know what had happened, they were left to imagine whatever they wanted. In a last-ditch effort to solve the mystery, one detective turned to a psychic in an effort to find comfort in the paranormal. The psychic's disturbing declaration rumbled through the space like a chilling breeze when she mentioned that Gretchen was already dead. However, it was still unclear where her body was. The town held onto the dwindling glimmer of hope, praying that they would find Gretchen and bring her home. The town was distraught and yearned for answers. But as the weeks and months passed, the mystery grew more complex, leaving everyone to wonder what actually happened to Gretchen Harrington on the gloomy day of October 14th, 1975. Tragically, as fate had it, the search for Gretchen came to an end. A Philadelphia Naval Yard seaman was stopped in his tracks by an unbelievable discovery while jockeying through Delaware County's Ridley Creek State Park. Hooting in the park's shadows are human remains. Despite the body's advanced state of decomposition, investigators were possessed by a terrifying certainty. They had a gut feeling they had located Gretchen. The clothing that was discovered there provided a chilling confirmation, and the grim identification was completed by dental records. The town, overcome with grief, lamented the passing of their once lively young girl, whose spirit now seemed to reverberate through the trees of the very park where she was laid to rest. The mystery surrounding Gretchen's tragic death persisted, leaving everyone with unanswered questions and a hole in their hearts. As the neighborhood struggled to cope with their loss, they vowed to honor Gretchen's memory by cherishing the joy she had offered in her short life and the effect she had on every person she came into contact with. She may be gone too soon, but her memories would stay in their hearts forever, as the town was desperate for the hunt of Gretchen's killer. State troopers diligently searched the park grounds with metal detectors in the hopes of finding some scrap of information that would bring the case to a conclusion. Detectives organized numerous interviews by examining the lives of local sexual offenders, but the trail was frustratingly elusive. They had strong suspicions about a specific person, but they were unable to prove it, so they were able to keep the suspect's identity a secret. This convicted sex offender, who was eventually detained on unrelated charges, emerged as a person of interest in Gretchen's case, but the investigative team had some reservations about this supposition. However, the tenacious search for additional leads went on. The community of Blomel yearned for justice and resolution as the once thriving tip slowly fizzled away and the case went cold. In November 1983, just as it seemed that time had forgotten Gretchen's tragedy, her case came to life once more. There was some hope when a Marple Township detective received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to have crucial information about the case. The lead detective made a sincere plea for the writer of the letter to come forward and provide more information, but the mystery informant remained silent, protecting their identity for years to come. As the years went by, those who loved Gretchen carried her memory with them forever. Her family was desperate for information and held out hope that, soon enough, the truth would come to light and that justice would be served for their sweet girl whose life was taken from her far too soon. Investigators made a significant discovery in early 2023 when they spoke with a criminal informant who had attended school with both Gretchen and Zoe Harrington, one of Gretchen's sisters. This police informant, who was a lady, recalled her being friends with the daughter of a man called David Zenstra. She mentioned how she frequently played at the Zenstra's house and many a time stayed for sleepovers. But her innocent recollections quickly turned into a disturbing account when she told the police that during 2 of those sleepovers, Mr. Zenstra made inappropriate advances towards her. She said she had woken up to him touching her in a very uncomfortable manner. As she continued with her testimony, the woman shared with the detectives a diary from her past. This diary had once been filled with a young girl's dreams, but soon turned out to display an unsettling confession written in her innocence. This confession was penned down a few days after Gretchen vanished. On September 15, 1975, the confession read, "Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice," talking about a student in her class. She continued, "Holly had scribbled it a secret, so I can't tell anyone, but I think he might be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z." She was making an oblique reference to David Zenstra. The sentence ended abruptly, giving away a sinister secret she was unable to reveal to anyone. The revelation sparked a flurry of new inquiries into David Zanstra's past, and the pieces of the puzzle started to come together as suspicions were raised that Zenstra might be the actual perpetrator of Gretchen's kidnapping. Shortly after the murder, it was discovered that these Zentras had hurriedly relocated to Plano, Texas, in order to avoid the attention of the time. Investigators were determined to look into the case further in light of the chilling truth. Reviving the long-dimmed hope, justice for Gretchen appeared to be on the horizon, but only time would tell if the long-buried secrets would come to light and Gretchen's family would finally receive the closure they had long sought. When authorities learned of the new information, they embarked on a determined search to find David Zenstra, who had moved to Marietta, Georgia, northwest of Atlanta. At the time of Gretchen's tragic disappearance, he held the position as a reverend at Trinity Church Chapel Christian Reformed Church in Brumo, and he was said to have been reportedly close to the Harringtons. His close friendship with the Harrington family gave him the chance to take advantage of Gretchen's trust that fateful morning. Zenstra had a history of being very active in religious communities, as evidenced by his past. In the 1960s, he was ordained as a minister in New Jersey. Later, he relocated to Chester, Pennsylvania, to start a new church. He was actively involved in Trinity Church Chapel by the early 1970s, where he oversaw the Bible school Gretchen attended and led youth summer workshops. The puzzle started to come together, and David Zenstra was surrounded by a growing cloud of suspicion. Gretchen's quest for justice was no longer a pipe dream. It was reachable, but there was no guarantee that it would be. The path to resolution would be paved with revelations and painstaking investigation in an effort to shed light on what happened to the young girl who was tragically abducted from her family. A startling revelation was made during the interview with David Zenstra on July 17, 2023, at Cobb County Police Headquarters in Marietta. He denied any involvement at first, but eventually broke down and admitted to the wicked deed. David Zenstra acknowledged seeing Gretchen heading towards the church that fateful morning. After convincing her that he was taking her to church, he picked her up in his green AMC Rambler station wagon. Gretchen never knew his motives were much darker. Instead of the church, Zenstra took her to a wooded area close by and asked her to take her clothes off. According to him, Gretchen declined. At that point, he was already overcome with desire and ejaculated in the car while she was still inside. In a fit of rage, he struck Gretchen violently with his fist, and she began bleeding from her head as a result. After the tragic event, he attempted to cover Gretchen's naked body with sticks after realizing that she appeared to be dead. He then fled the scene, leaving her lifeless body in the bleak woods. The chilling confession revealed the monstrous deeds of someone who was supposed to be a man of God and a dependable friend of Gretchen's family, painting a horrifying picture of betrayal and brutality. The revelation of the truth brought with it a sense of closure for Gretchen's loved ones, as well as intense pain and sorrow over the loss of an innocent life that had been taken so brutally. When 83-years-old David Zanstra of Marietta, Georgia was formally charged with Gretchen's murder on July 24, 2023 by the District Attorney's Office in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, justice for Gretchen finally started to take shape. A slew of charges, including criminal homicide, kidnapping of a minor, possessing an instrument of crime, and murder in the first, second, and third degrees were brought against the man who had previously worked as a minister at the church in the 1970s. When David Zanstra was refused bail and imprisoned in Cobb County, Georgia, he resisted being extradited to Pennsylvania, which prompted the authorities to request a governor's warrant to transport him to Delaware. David Zanstra would likely be found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. According to County District Attorney Stolzheimer, who promised to see that justice was done, the haunting cloud that had hung over Brummel for almost 48 years began to lift as the community found solace in the knowledge that the man responsible for Gretchen's kidnapping and murder would finally face the consequences of his actions. Gretchen's case had a significant impact on the community, and Marple Township's police chief, Brandon Greff, recognized how the town had changed as a result. An important step toward resolution was made with the charges brought against David Zanstra. Gretchen and her grieving family finally received long overdue vindication. The promise of justice offered a glimmer of hope that Gretchen's tragic story would serve as a warning, ensuring that no other child would suffer from such evil once more. However, the memory of Gretchen's stolen innocence would always remain in her family's hearts. Gretchen's tragic fate had a significant effect on the formerly picture-perfect town of Brummel in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. On that tragic day in August 1975, the community's innocence was lost, leaving a lasting scar on the lives of the kids, parents, families, and everyone else who called the town home. The eagerly anticipated trial that is about to start promises to provide answers and closure to the community that has been burdened by this tragic chapter for such a long time. The case of Gabriella Alcano. Gabriella Alcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, Chile, to Federico Alcano and Carolina de los Ocampos. She was their only child and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and was very close to her, just like her grandfather Carlos, who cherished her. Gabriella grew up in a middle-class family that valued education and provided her with a good upbringing despite not being wealthy. When Gabriella was just 5 years old, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriella and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriella was a kind, friendly, and open child who was a bit shy and modest, but she made friends easily and got along with her peers. She had a lovely appearance that earned her admiration and delight from everyone around her. Gabriella excelled in school, loved music, dancing, and drawing, and her parents encouraged her talents. She enjoyed spending time with her younger brothers at her father's house, which was nearby. And overall, her childhood was a happy and carefree time surrounded by loving family members. At 15, Gabriella fell in love for the first time with Fabian, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. They started out as a happy couple, walking hand in hand, eating ice cream and stealing kisses. Fabian came from a good family and his parents were well respected and wanted the best for him. However, Fabian himself was quiet and secretive, avoiding eye contact and preferring not to talk to others. This led many to assume he was shy, but it's likely he struggled with social anxiety. When Gabriella introduced Fabian to her father, he approved of her choice, seeing Fabian as calm, responsible, and rational. The father had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriella and promising not to harm her or let others harm her. Fabian promised to do so. At first, their relationship was loving and calm, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this peace didn't last. After a few months, Fabian's true nature emerged, and he became controlling and cruel. He tried to dictate every aspect of Gabriella's life, became jealous, and decided who she could and couldn't hang out with. He monitored her phone, demanding immediate responses to his calls and messages, and would throw tantrums if she didn't comply. For the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriella downplayed her boyfriend Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, thinking they were temporary and that he would eventually go back to being the kind and caring person she fell in love with. She tried to accommodate all his demands, hoping that his behavior would improve. However, Fabian only became more aggressive and volatile over time. He started to emotionally wear Gabriella down, and his abuse eventually escalated beyond verbal aggression. He would physically intimidate her, slapping her, pulling her hair, and grabbing her hands. Although these actions often left no visible marks, friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. As Gabriella struggled to cope with the abuse, she became withdrawn and depressed. Her friends and family noticed the change in her, seeing the tears in her eyes and the sadness that had replaced her former smile. She started distancing herself from others, avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from speaking to. Gabriella repeatedly tried to have conversations with her boyfriend Fabian, but it was unsuccessful. She even broke up with him multiple times, only to be coerced back into the relationship by Fabian. This pattern of breakups, stalking and threats continued for over a year. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. He was accused of abuse and assault and faced possible jail time. However, the case was settled out of court and Fabian was expelled from school, forced to complete his education through homeschooling. After this event, Gabriella finally decided to end the toxic relationship for good. However, Fabian refused to accept it. He apologized, made empty promises to change, and begged her to take him back. When Gabriella rejected him, Fabian resorted to stalking, blackmail, and threats in an attempt to control her and maintain their relationship. Fabian stalked Gabriella at her school and home, even attempting to break into her bedroom through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, making constant threats and tearful apologies in an effort to control her. Despite his harassment, Gabriella remained firm in her decision to end the relationship. Fabian would occasionally vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had finally moved on. However, he would inevitably reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her be. He followed her everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing disturbing scenes. As a result, Gabriella became terrified of being alone, always ensuring she was accompanied by friends or family. She would go to her mother's workplace after school, and they would head home together. When she needed to travel, she would ask her father or uncle to escort her. This ordeal continued for months, leaving Gabriella drained and exhausted, though she tried not to show it. A series of tragic events began in early 2018 when the Alcano family was devastated by a terrible crime. A burglar broke into Federico's home where his second wife lived and murdered her, while the children were at school and Federico was at work. The perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior criminal record, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother stepped in to support Federico and his children during this difficult time. This tragedy temporarily shifted Gabriella's attention away from Fabian, who had mysteriously disappeared around the same time. Meanwhile, Gabriella was also busy preparing for entrance exams, driven by her ambition to attend one of Santiago's top universities and pursue a career in journalism or advertising. The tragedy was only the beginning of a series of devastating events for the Alcano family. By May 2018, Fabian, Gabriella's ex-boyfriend, began stalking her relentlessly. He would climb over her home's fence or show up at the supermarket or mall, making her feel unsafe everywhere she went. Gabriella was terrified and sent screenshots of threatening messages from Fabian to someone, pleading for help. She confessed her fear for herself and her loved ones, but chose not to tell her family about the stalking and threats, afraid of worrying them. On June 10, 2018, the Alcano family gathered at Carlos' house to celebrate his 80th birthday. However, this joyful family event would ultimately be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful, filled with laughter, music, and a large family meal. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and cousins, but appeared troubled and distant. Her uncle Rodrigo noticed her distress and asked if everything was all right. But Gabriella just smiled sadly, shrugged and said she was nervous without explaining why. Her uncle chose not to press the issue, thinking she would open up when ready, but later deeply regretted this decision. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. At around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, jumped over the fence of his ex-girlfriend Gabriella's house. He planned to sneak into her bedroom through the window and attack her. But just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, Gabriella's mother, had been awakened by the noise and was checking on the commotion. Fabian attacked her, pushing her back inside and stabbing her repeatedly. In total, he inflicted 36 stab wounds, mostly to her chest, neck, and head, leaving her with no chance of survival. Carolina managed to scream briefly, which woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to investigate. As she descended, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and enraged. He grabbed her and dragged her down. Gabriella desperately tried to call emergency services on her phone, but Fabian stopped her. He then stabbed her in the chest, piercing her heart, which proved to be a fatal blow. Fabian moved Gabriella's body to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He attempted to erase his traces by wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the motor weapon in the bathroom. Finally, he quietly left the house around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. After Carolina failed to show up for work for 2 days and didn't answer her phone, her colleagues became worried. She was a responsible person and wouldn't just disappear without a reason. Her boss contacted Federico, her partner, to ask if he knew what was going on. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone went unanswered. He also tried calling his daughter, Gabriella's phone, but it was turned off. He then called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to the two since Carlos' birthday party. Federico rushed to Carolina's house, which looked empty, but the car was still in the garage. He walked around the house, knocking on doors and peeking through windows, but he didn't want to go inside, even though he had a spare key. Instead, he called the police and asked them to check the house. When the police arrived, they wondered why Federico hadn't used his spare key to enter the house. Federico admitted he was afraid of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he finally opened the door and went in with the officers. That's when they discovered the bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor. They had been dead for over a day. Federico was overwhelmed with grief and desperately called for an ambulance, pleading with someone to save his loved ones. However, the officers had to calm him down and his agitated behavior raised suspicions. As a result, he was taken outside to a police car for further questioning. When Federico tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was being treated as the prime suspect in a double murder investigation. Rodrigo soon arrived at the scene and was shocked to find that his brother was being held by the police. He was devastated by the news of his niece's death and couldn't understand why there was no ambulance or any medical assistance being provided. Both Federico and Rodrigo were taken in for questioning and their alibis were thoroughly investigated. Fortunately, they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, as it was established that they were with their family at the time of the crime. Further investigation revealed that Gabriella had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend, with friends providing evidence of threatening messages and voice recordings. Federico remembered the obsessed suitor his daughter had tried to break up with, but he never thought the seemingly harmless boy she had introduced to him was capable of such a horrific crime. The police investigation into Fabian Caesar, the young man, revealed that he had gotten rid of the murder weapon and thrown away clothes with blood stains. Despite this, his shoes still had tiny blood drops on them, and the pattern on the soles matched prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, four of Gabriella's classmates came forward to say they had heard Fabian threaten Gabriella, stating he would rather kill her than let her go. As the evidence and witness statements mounted, Fabian was forced to admit to the crime. However, he tried to present himself as a lovesick individual who had not meant to harm Gabriella, but rather just wanted to talk to her. He claimed that things got out of control, and he ended up dealing with her mother, who unfortunately became an unwanted witness. After completing the autopsies and necessary tests, the authorities returned the bodies of the victims to their families for burial. At the funeral, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was buried in the white dress she had always wanted to wear, and Carolina's casket was closed due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired an experienced lawyer who built a strong defense, promising a reduced sentence during the preliminary hearings. The lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean criminal record, arguing that the dispute with his classmate had been resolved out of court. However, the victim's family demanded that Fabian be charged with femicide. The prosecution rejected this charge, as according to Chilean law, femicide only applies when the perpetrator and victim are spouses or live together, which was not the case for the two teenagers. Fabian's lawyer claimed that he had acted impulsively and under distress, which could lead to a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Alum family, understandably, wanted the harshest punishment for him. Following the initial court hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested that he be released pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious, having lost 3 women close to him to violent deaths. The lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriella's law. This law would expand the definition of femicide to include cases where the victims were in romantic relationships with their killers, even if they weren't married or living together. The proposed bill faced opposition because it would mean that perpetrators already in prison for similar crimes could face new charges and lose their eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alum family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriella's law. In August 2019, Chile's government introduced amendments to its femicide law over a year after the devastating murders. These amendments, known as Gabriella's law, included 15 key changes that were later approved by Congress. Under this new law, femicide is defined as any violent act, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of her relationship with the perpetrator. The law also considers additional circumstances, such as the victim being a minor or having health issues, to be aggravating factors. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years prior. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had no grounds to challenge the charges. Fabian was subsequently convicted of femicide under aggravating circumstances as one of the victims was a minor and also of double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. In 2018, Sarah Ashley Hill, a mother of 2 who was 33 years old, was employed as a waiter at a neighborhood diner in Patrick County, Virginia. She was well known for her kind disposition, upbeat smile, and passion for dancing and music. She was very close to a sister, April, who frequently assisted her with her kids. Out of her 5 siblings, Sarah was the only one with the attractive red hair and vivid blue eyes. She used to get teased and told she was adopted by her siblings. Sarah was visiting her friends in North Carolina in June of 2018. She called April on her cell phone at 1:30 a.m. on June 6th, informing her that she was on Blue Hollow Road, close to Mount Airy, and that she would need a ride. Sarah did not give an explanation for her early morning walk. April was unable to simply leave her job, which was nearly an hour away. At Elkins Hugh Chatham Memorial Hospital, April worked as a registered nurse. Sarah Hill had vanished from view by the time the family got to Mount Airy. They assumed she had found another ride, Or perhaps she had managed to get into her own vehicle, a white 2000 Ford Taurus. When April texted Sarah the following day to check on her and to ask if she still needed a ride, April received no response. When April called back, it went to voicemail. Sarah's phone had been switched off for 2 weeks. It was highly unusual for Sarah to be disconnected from everyone for so long. April claims that they spoke at least once a week, if not more frequently. April mentioned that Sarah had a lot of dubious friends and was dependent on illegal substances. April pondered whether it had anything to do with her sister going missing. Sarah was officially declared missing 1 month after her last sighting. Investigators began looking into her disappearance right away. Her white Ford Taurus was soon sighted at a shop close to the intersection of Blue Hollow Road and North Carolina 89. It was captured on camera footage that the store owner obtained while attempting to apprehend shoplifters. Sarah was, however, not named among the people suspected of misconduct there. Upon searching the vehicle, the police discovered Sarah's handbag, phone keys, and a few personal belongings inside. Nevertheless, no DNA fingerprints or other identifying marks that may have connected someone to her disappearance were discovered. The police thought of every scenario in which Sarah might have vanished. They looked into any enemies or issues she might have had with anyone who could have hurt her. They looked to see if she was burdened with debt or other financial issues that might have caused her to elope. Investigators also investigated whether she had a history of substance abuse or mental illness, which could have influenced her behavior or judgment. They looked into any romantic relationships or domestic conflicts she may have had that could have resulted in aggression or jealousy. They did not, however, discover any proof to back up any of these theories. 3 separate properties on King Park Circle in Mount Airy, North Carolina, were among the many locations the Surry County Sheriff's Office checked during the investigation that began in January 2019. After following Sarah's last known movements, detectives surmised that she was in the neighboring Stokes County, where she had been hanging out with a man. This person of interest displayed suspicious behavior, including restricting entry into his residence. It was found that the man had faced assault charges in the past. The Asbury Road property in Stokes County, North Carolina, where Sarah was last seen at the time of her disappearance, was shown to detectives in 2022. The Surry County Sheriff's Office, the Stokes County Sheriff's Office, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation carried out the execution of a search warrant for the property located at 1791 Asbury Road, Westfield, North Carolina on Monday, October 17, 2022. Investigators brought in specialist personnel to use heavy machinery to stabilize an existing structure and move dirt and terrain. Beneath the floorboards were human remains. Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center received the remains. After an autopsy on October 20, 2022, it was determined that Sarah Ashley Hill's remains were what was found. The Stokes County Sheriff's Office announced on October 11, 2023, that Leroy Hoover had been detained and charged with killing Sarah. Hoover is presently awaiting trial while being held without bond in the Stokes County Jail. In Stokes County, he is also involved in other cases. We can only imagine how difficult this has been for the family of Miss Hill, Sheriff Joey Lemons remarked. The detectives working on this case from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the Patrick County Sheriff's Office, the Surry County Sheriff's Office, and the Stokes County Sheriff's Office did an amazing job and never gave up. While nothing can truly bring a loved one back, we can only hope that this gives Miss Hill's family some sense of closure. In 2002, 23-year-old Cheryl Taylor lived in Weldon, North Carolina. She was married to John Olsby, her high school sweetheart. They had a 7-year-old daughter named Justice. On the morning of August 16, 2002, Justice woke up and realized that Cheryl had not woken her up in time for the school bus and she missed it. She went to her mom's bedroom, and it was there that she discovered that someone had taken Cheryl's life. An autopsy showed that she had been strangled and presumably assaulted. It was not made public if there were signs of forced entry or if investigators were able to collect forensic evidence from the crime scene that belonged to the perpetrator. Despite an extensive investigation by authorities, no arrests were made and the case went cold. Justice and John grieved together for 17 more years. Tragically again, by December 2019, after going missing, John Osby was found fatally shot and rolled up in a blanket near Sycamore Street in Weldon. Investigators were unable to track down the person that shot him, and for years the family was left wondering if they would ever get answers to what happened to John and Cheryl Taylor. That changed when Sheriff Tyree Davis hired Detective Sergeant Rich Summergy as Halifax County's dedicated cold case investigator in January 2023. His job was to pore over the office's unsolved cold cases, looking for anything that investigators may have missed in the past, and using new technology to find clues that were out of reach before. Detective Rich Summergy first looked into John Osby's case, before realizing Cheryl's life had been taken by someone years earlier. He identified the person responsible for what happened to Cheryl. Finally, on July 21, 2023, 46-year-old Lewis Turner Jr. was arrested and charged with taking Cheryl Taylor's life. He was living in Northampton County, North Carolina. It is not known yet if he is responsible for shooting John Osby. It was revealed that Turner was a friend of Cheryl and her family back in 2002 when he took her life. Turner was 25 years old when the crime took place. He has 2 other criminal charges on his record: assaults from when he was a teen. In both of those cases, he got probation. After being arrested and charged with voluntary manslaughter, Turner was held at the Halifax County Jail under $250,000 bond. Scott Hall, patrol captain of the Halifax County Sheriff's Office, outlined the reasoning behind the voluntary manslaughter charge. This was not a premeditated crime with malice. Based on the facts of the case and elements of the crime, we charged accordingly. Sheriff Tyree Davis remarked how he cried tears of joy at being able to arrest a suspect in connection with Cheryl's case. I received the call that we were able to solve one of our cold cases. A cold case from over 20 years ago. No one knew about this information, and we could not say anything until we notified the family first. However, I was instantly overcome with emotion and tears started to flow. As a member of the state commission, I was sitting up front with the other board members and I tried to hold things together. I did so just by wiping the tears away. But once I started sniffling, I knew I needed to leave the room. Folks, I can tell you that these tears were tears of joy. These were tears of excitement. Excitement not only for Taylor's family, but also excitement for her friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and anyone that she had ever crossed paths with. I was excited for the community because this is a beacon of hope for all those families that need closure too. Cheryl's daughter, Justice Osby, had this to say after the arrest. Unbelievable. We never knew this day was coming. Justice said she is grateful to everyone who helped bring Turner to justice, and she is glad that she can finally have some closure. She said, "I am just so thankful for everyone that participated and helped me get closure for my family, because today is a good day." The case of Hannah Clark. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother of 3 young children, 2 sweet girls, Aaliyah and Liana, and a rambunctious boy named Trey. Hannah's loved ones remember her as a kind and gentle soul with a bright smile that could light up anyone's heart. She was a selfless and caring mother who gave her all to her children. Hannah's family life was marked by her relationship with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player for the New Zealand Warriors team. Despite their significant age difference, they formed a strong bond, which deepened over time. Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, struggled to accept Rowan, but Hannah refused to listen to her concerns. People close to Rowan shared negative opinions about him. Sue, Hannah's mother, had a nagging feeling that something was off about Rowan. She perceived him as arrogant and self-centered, which made her uneasy. She was also concerned about the significant age gap between Rowan and Hannah. When they first met, Hannah was a recent graduate while Rowan was 31 years old. Additionally, Rowan's past relationships were a worry for Sue, particularly since he was still in the process of divorcing his previous wife and was living with her at the time. When Hannah introduced Rowan to her parents, they questioned him about his ex-wife. Rowan explained that he was staying with her due to their son. Eventually, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued his relationship with Hannah. In 2011, he proposed to her and she accepted. They got married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. The following year, they had 3 children together. Hannah and her family, including her father Rowan, were passionate about sports. However, Rowan's muscular physique developed during his professional athlete days was partly due to steroid use, which led to mental health issues. As a personal trainer, Hannah's approach differed from her father's. She was loved by her clients for her kindness, empathy, and dedication, earning her a loyal following. Rowan's approach to training was unique, but his behavior was marred by aggression and inappropriateness, likely caused by steroid use. This made him a poor trainer, as clients don't need someone who makes them feel uncomfortable. Rowan struggled to communicate effectively with people, which negatively impacted his career and finances. As a result, his wife Hannah had to become the primary breadwinner, which further irritated Rowan. He felt emasculated by her success as she was doing a better job than he was. Despite their financial struggles, they decided to open their own fitness club. However, this decision was largely driven by Rowan's desire to control Hannah's every move and monitor her whereabouts. Rowan's behavior in the store mirrored his past actions at the gyms where he worked. He often felt the need to assert superiority over women. During a private training session with Sue's mother, he showed his cruel side, acting inappropriately instead of showing respect. He dropped Sue, causing her to hit her head and bleed, and laughed at her clumsiness, showing no sympathy. Despite this alarming behavior, Hannah's parents tried to accept him for their daughter's sake. Rowan's control over Hannah was all-encompassing, and he isolated her from her family and friends. He dictated who she could see and when, and even forbade the children from visiting their grandmother and Hannah from communicating with her brother, whom he disliked. As a result, Hannah felt trapped and enslaved, confined to the walls of her own home. Rowan's behavior towards Hannah was also emotionally and physically abusive. He would demand intimacy from her, and if she refused, he would become enraged, taking out his anger on her and the children. After forcing himself on her, he would then apologize insincerely, attributing his behavior to a burst of passion. Hannah's life was slowly under the constant control and cruelty of her husband, Rowan. Their marriage, once filled with love and passion, had degenerated into a nightmare of fear and submission. Rowan's tyrannical behavior had created a toxic environment where Hannah lived in constant terror of his wrath. Rowan's cruelty was not limited to Hannah. He also targeted their children. While some playful exchanges between parents and children are normal, Rowan frequently crossed the line, intentionally hurting and belittling them. When the children cried, he would mock them, showing no empathy or respect for their feelings. For example, a conflict between Rowan and his daughter Aaliyah turned disastrous when Rowan used excessive force, causing Aaliyah to hit her head. The injury was severe enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of taking responsibility and apologizing, Rowan blamed Aaliyah for the incident. This was not an isolated incident, as Rowan had a history of tormenting his children. As an athlete, he would take ice baths after training, but he would also force his children, including his young son Trey, to sit in icy water, disregarding their tears and pleas for mercy. In the same year, Hannah's life took a drastic turn for the worse. Rowan, who had recently become interested in jiu-jitsu, returned home from a training session one day, still pumped up with adrenaline. Without warning, he physically attacked Hannah, grabbing her throat with a tight grip and uttering terrifying words. Consumed by fear, Hannah didn't immediately recognize that she was experiencing domestic violence. However, this incident was far more frightening than anything she had previously endured. As a result, Hannah made up her mind to leave Rowan at the earliest chance. After reaching out to the police, she provided a detailed account of the horrific experience to the officer. The police officer informed Hannah that forcing an intimate relationship without consent is a form of domestic violence. This conversation was a turning point for Hannah, helping her understand the situation and prompting her to take immediate action. She quickly gathered her children and left for her parents' house, trying to escape the abusive situation. Although their divorce was not yet finalized in November 2019, Hannah made the decision to allow Rowan to spend time with their children. However, She was aware that she had no legal authority to control this arrangement without a court's intervention. Even so, Hannah was still uneasy about leaving the children in Rowan's care. To fix his problem, Rowan was struggling to cope with his emotions and sought help from his church's pastor, Christopher. Christopher was a kind and supportive person who was always willing to listen. However, as Rowan began to open up to him, Christopher noticed some disturbing traits. Rowan had a desire for dominance and control, which he occasionally revealed when his confidence faltered. During one of these moments, Rowan confessed to Christopher that he was aware his actions were wrong and wanted to change, but didn't know how. Rowan's admission was a crucial step towards reform, and Christopher's guidance could have been instrumental in helping him. However, before progress could be made, a shocking event occurred. Hannah and her children were walking down the street when Rowan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, grabbed their daughter Lion, and disappeared. Hannah's life was turned upside down by unbearable anxiety and fear for her daughter Lion's safety. For 2 agonizing days, she had no idea where Lion was, and her distress grew by the minute. Hannah turned to the police, who launched a search and eventually found Lion safe and sound with her father. Although Lion was unharmed, the traumatic experience left a lasting impact on Hannah. The police, recognizing the danger that Hannah and her children faced, urged her to file a police report against her ex and obtain a protection order. However, despite the problems her ex, Rowan, had caused, he still had joint custody of the children, which he used to continue manipulating and abusing Hannah. After a meeting with Rowan, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. However, before leaving, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying pictures of her in her underwear on his car, in plain sight of their children. Hannah, enraged, tried to remove the photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and punched her in the face, splitting her lip. The attack was only stopped when Hannah's mother, Sue, intervened. As Rowan drove away, he yelled insults. Hannah, traumatized, immediately reported the incident to the police, as it was a clear violation of the protection order. Unfortunately, the authorities were unable to respond in time, which ultimately led to a tragic outcome. It was a typical morning on February 19, 2020. Hannah grabbed her car keys and left her parents' house to drop off her 3 kids at kindergarten. Hannah and her children got into the car, but before they could leave, Rowan jumped in, causing Hannah to become frightened for their safety. She tried to calm Rowan down, but he was furious and began yelling threats and ordering Hannah to start the car and drive away. Hannah carefully drove off, trying not to escalate the situation. As she turned onto Raven Street, the car stopped. In a desperate and vengeful act, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the car seat and drenched Hannah and her children with it. Michael ZCK, who happened to be nearby, witnessed the horrific scene. He said that earlier that morning, he had heard a car pull up outside his house. Hannah, frantic and pleading for help, screamed that Rowan was trying to kill her and pouring gasoline all over them. As Hannah begged for mercy, Rowan refused to let her go, his face twisted in a rage. Michael rushed to the car and was met with a Rowan's emotionless face, holding a lighter in his hand. In the next moment, the car erupted in flames. The explosion was followed by blood-curdling screams, a deafening ringing, and then an eerie silence. Luckily, Hannah had narrowly escaped the inferno, but was left with severe burns and bleeding. Frantically, she pleaded for assistance, not for her own suffering, but for her children who remained trapped in the blazing car. A car happened to drive by, and a doctor who was not on duty stopped to offer assistance. Seeing Hannah's distress, the doctor rushed to her side. Meanwhile, Michael intervened quickly, grabbing a hose from his house to try and extinguish the flames. However, the fire was too intense, and it engulfed the entire car, leaving no hope of rescuing the children. The doctor and Michael yelled at Hannah to take cover and get away from the fire, but she was too consumed by grief to hear them. With growing desperation, Michael rushed to the car to rescue the children, but the intense flames and scorching heat thwarted his efforts. Hannah lay on the road, her body badly burned, repeatedly begging for someone to save her children. At that moment, no one grasped the full extent of the tragedy. Hannah's body was severely burned, with over 97% of her skin damaged, except for her feet. Despite her excruciating pain, Hannah's thoughts were consumed by her children, who were now left vulnerable and unprotected. Hannah's badly burned body left police doubting her survival chances. Yet she refused to give up. With fierce determination, she provided a crucial testimony. Police officer Angus Cook carefully recorded every word Hannah spoke as she struggled to recount the events leading up to her tragic situation. With great difficulty, Hannah managed to name her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the person responsible for her ordeal and provided a detailed account of what had happened. As Hannah's voice grew weaker and her body frail, Officer Angus remained by her side, offering words of encouragement and praise for her bravery. He reassured her that she had already done enough and that everything would be okay. Hannah was on the brink of death, yet she didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about whether Rowan had threatened her earlier, she replied that he hadn't. As doctors approached to alleviate her suffering, she lost the ability to speak. Meanwhile, Rowan Baxter's behavior was erratic. Despite suffering severe burns covering 80% of his body, he managed to exit the car unassisted. Rowan sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After a brief moment, he inexplicably climbed back into the car, which was engulfed in flames. A witness, putting their own life at risk, attempted to extinguish the fire at the back of the car. It was then that Rowan retrieved a knife from the vehicle and began to chase people away, preventing them from putting out the flames. The children, trapped in the burning car, had little chance of survival. Nevertheless, bystanders refused to give up their efforts to save them. Rowan refused to let anyone approach the car, claimed them to a horrific death. In a final, selfish act, he stabbed himself with the knife. Despite her own life-threatening injuries, her primary concern was for the health of her children and her desire to reveal the truth. Tragically, Hannah passed away in the hospital on the same day at the young age of 31. Hannah was a victim of severe domestic violence, which also affected her children. She fought tirelessly to protect her family from their abuser, but sadly, her efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Throughout her daily struggles, Hannah showed immense courage, standing up for her loved ones despite the numerous challenges she faced. For days later, a massive gathering took place to pay tribute to Hannah and her children. A lasting memorial, Hannah's house, was also created in Camp Hill, where a tree planting ceremony was held in her honor, accompanied by a plaque that tells the story of her life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.